One of the biggest problems associated with the Masters of Business Administration is simply where do you get the money to pay for it? If we go back to the famous stage production Fame, there was that great line, they've got what it takes, but it will take everything they've got. And that can apply to an MBA, but in the context of the South African MBA, we've got a big problem. I've got what it takes, maybe, but it costs more than I've got to get on the course. This is a short presentation about financing your MBA on what it's all about. Now, when one looks at a university in South Africa today, one finds that they have three forms of finance. They have government subsidies, student fees, and donor funding. And basically, the higher the government subsidy, the lower the student fee. That's what universities try to do. In the context of an MBA, the government subsidies are quite low. And when it comes to donor funding to try and get more people into MBAs, one finds that corporate social investment projects today are competing with student education, and consequently funding isn't readily available. A lot of the donor funding also goes to bricks and mortar donations to build more facility within educational institutions today. And then there is also a lot of donor funding that needs to go to research, another major objective of the university. So when it comes to Section 18 Cap A, deductible donations to universities, there are problems. And one must add to that as well, that where the donor to a university tries to select a student, there can be a problem in getting a tax deduction on the donation. That's a small technical problem. So when we come to an MBA, government subsidies are low, donor funding is low, and therefore student fees make it a very expensive proposition. Now, we have to find a way of sorting this out. And the trick, if there is one, is to look at donor funding but from a different perspective, looking at it as employer funding and a relationship that it can legally exist between student fees and employer funding. It works something like this. The individual tax brackets of South Africa are such that those are earning under 60,000 rands a year don't pay tax, and in fact up to 235,000 rands a year or 20,000 rands per month, the tax rates are very low. But when one moves into the middle tax brackets above 235,000, you can see a 30% tax rate applying. And when one goes over 455,000, you might as well already be in super tax, where we get the maximum 40% level. But many graduates sit in the tax brackets 30 to 35% or 38% to 40%. And what they are trying to do is to pay for their postgraduate studies out of after-tax money when they have already paid a whole slug of tax. This is simply not necessary. What they are trying to do is that they're trying to say, right, I'm earning, let's say, 325,000 rands per annum. My tax on that with no tax deductions against it is 75,250, less a rebate, gives me total tax of 64,495. That leaves me with a take-home salary of 260,000, and I then go and pay my MBA fees of about 40,000 rands a year, leaving me with only 220,000 rand to live on. What you see with that is that the tax and the university fees are soaking up a third of the total income of the graduate. Now let's rethink that. Why don't we go another way? We go to the employer, and you can take them this presentation if you want, and say, I want to reconstitute my employment contract. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, my cost to company is 325,000 rand per year. But I want to take it in the form of a 40,000 rand study bursary and 285,000 rands in taxable salary. That will then reduce my taxation to 63,250, less the rebate, giving you total tax of 52,495 and a take-home salary of 232,505. The saving is thus 12,000 Rand towards your MBA, which is an immediate 30% discount achieved. And that's not too shabby for starters. It's showing quite legally that if you are willing to make the effort to go into postgraduate study, you can arrange a legitimate bursary with your employer. But let's go about it another way. How about going to my employer and saying, just look at me, how wonderful I am, I'm going to do an MBA, and you are going to benefit out of this as well. Why don't we restructure my package so we have the university? I will pay out of my portion 50% of the costs, i.e. 20,000 Rand per annum. And you, my employer, please will you pay 20,000 Rands as well, because you're going to benefit from it when I graduate. Then my tax comp looks very different, because I started off with 325,000. My study bursary, which is being charged against my package, is then only 20,000, reducing my pre-tax to 305,000. Tax is then 69,000 less 10 gives you 58, and the take-home salary is 246. That is 26,000 Rand better than when we started this exercise out of the total cost of the MBA of 40,000 Rand, leaving the after-tax salary to the student at 14,000 Rands per annum. And basically we have achieved a 65% discount on the fees. Now that's starting to look more manageable at that stage. The question comes up, is this legal? And the answer to that is absolutely. You can show this video to whomever you want. I'm putting it up on YouTube for everybody to have a look at, to get a better idea. And there are only two requirements that go with this scheme, and those are, number one, that you pass. Number two, that you have some sort of obligation to return to your employer once you have graduated, and to carry on working there so that the employer gets some benefit out of it. Finally, we must say, well, what is this all about? Why do we do an MBA? Here's a little calculation I've just proposed. I'm saying, if you graduate from an MBA, perhaps you will increase your income by up to 30,000 Rands per month for the rest of your working life. If it takes you 3 years to get an MBA and the remaining of your working life is 30 years, if we were working out what that degree is worth using a 9% inflation factor and a 14% rate of return, we would say that the value of the additional income stream generated is something in the order of 18 million Rand. What one must always take into account is the greatest return on investment that you can ever make is a degree. And that is one of the reasons why we go into postgraduate study.